Hello guys, and welcome to Supreme Ruler Ultimate with my latest guide on loyalty. This is going to be a bit of a loyalty weekend because today I'm going to be teaching you how loyalty works in Supreme Ruler Ultimate if you're getting into this game or you're curious to learn more. And then tomorrow I have a video covering Supreme Ruler 2030 and how they're changing loyalty in that game. But let's get into today's topic. So, in Supreme Ruler Ultimate, you play as a nation, and every nation has loyalties within it. I'm sure you might notice something a little interesting or a little different, a little weird here with the coloring and the lighting of Great Britain, which I have loaded up to show you how this works. Well, let's take a look at the loyalty map instead of the ownership map, and we might get a better look at why it looks a little bit different. So we're going to turn off the ownership map and turn on the loyalty map, and you'll see here on these islands we have 1, 2, 3, 4 notable loyalties here. One of them is our loyalty. If I click around here on the land tab, you'll see it looks like this, right? Now, if I click over here, you'll see there's a new thing here, a flag showing a nation and a loyalty indicator. And you can see it's like exiled nation, it doesn't exist. To show you guys how this can also look, if we go over here to Port Arthur, where the Japanese own, I can't say the name of this place, we can see that it has a flag as well showing China, which is right here, and there is no skull next to it. That's because China actually exists, whereas if we come look at the Great Britain, we can see Scotland does not exist and neither part of Ireland exists. They are all just part of our country. They are exiled nations. Exiled nations just means that they don't exist, and that's why you might see a skull and crossbones, and sometimes you might not see it. Every nation in Supreme Ruler Ultimate has a base loyalty, and that is why when we click on England and Wales, we can see that there is just one loyalty. It doesn't actually show that it's anything different because this is where our loyalty is located. It even extends over here to these two islands over here in the strait. In the simplest terms, loyalty in Supreme Ruler Ultimate is what every nation in the game is hard-coded to be able to be broken down to in its smallest pieces. So if every nation in the world was released as they are coded into the game, because a nation has to be coded in generally to exist, it has to be in the database, the map you're seeing here, the loyalty map, is what these countries would look like. Here we have Poland, and it extends like some of its territories taken over by other things. Here we have Moldova, doesn't actually exist. Here's what Ukraine looks like on this map in 1914. America just has one big loyalty. Canada is split into a couple different ones in this era. Basically, the loyalties as you see them are all the different nations coded into the game. They are just represented differently based on what era you're in, some not existing, but you could release every single one of these into existence if you wanted to, and that somewhat happens in the Shattered World scenarios, except they kind of add a lot more loyalties to get more nations out of the map. Other than serving as a hard-coded limit to what nations can exist in the game, loyalties also bring with them a lot of modifiers. For example, when you're setting up a game, there's an option that you can turn off if you want for supply and line of sight affected by loyalty. And this is what we're seeing here. You notice how there's some brighter parts. If we go back to the ownership map, there's some parts here that are pretty bright, and then there's some parts that are really dark compared to England, which is just entirely bright. What you're seeing there is line of sight. Because these areas are not my core loyalty, they do not share full territorial line of sight with me. So I would actually have to place, for example, radar stations later on, or I would need recon satellites, or I would need my own units present to see everything that is dark. There's even specialized recon units, and they can help you gain line of sights in this area. And there's also, of course, a supply mechanic, of which you would receive less supply if you were operating out of somewhere that is not in your core loyalty to you. That is one of the simpler effects that loyalty has because, well, it can also just be turned off, and honestly, I recommend you do so, but it's up to you how you play your game. Not only can you release loyalties in this game and make a bunch of different independent nations with them, but they actively want to leave you. There is one spending in the finance tab under social spending known as law enforcement, and your quality rating here is actually very important for handling loyalties that do not directly belong to you, especially if you're a warmonger, because if this is anything less than 100%, you run a constantly increased risk that partisans or guerrillas, other kinds of freedom fighters, will spawn and try to take some of these locations over. For example, Scottish partisans or guerrillas could potentially rise up depending on your spending and who owns it, and try to form Scotland by taking over parts of the loyalty that belong to them. So for example, if Germany goes and conquers France, they'll have to keep their spending on law enforcement pretty high, at least middle of the bar with no bonuses. Otherwise, they'll have to deal with French partisans rising up, which will force them to have to keep kinds of garrison units and other defensive units around to stomp them out if they don't spend the money here in law enforcement, which is definitely the simpler thing to do. And that is generally, events aside, how loyalties trying to get their own independence works in the game through a simple rebellion mechanic, as I've just explained. And now let's jump to probably the single biggest way you are going to interact with loyalty in Supreme Ruler Ultimate in total, and that is production efficiency. So let's say I build an ore mine, agriculture, timber, a factory, you name it. I build something that produces a resource or processes one here in England. It will function at exactly the capacities advertised based on my infrastructure spending and my supply that's going into the factory. However, if I build the same exact thing over here in Scotland, Northern Ireland, you name it, anything that is not my core loyalty, and this is a big problem for some nations, like Austria-Hungary, whose only core territory is this right here. You don't have a lot of space to function with there for the purposes of getting max efficiency out of your factories. That's a lot of wasted money and resources going into your industry, your economy, your production, and most importantly, I guess, really your finances. The efficiency that you get out of a fully funded, fully infrastructured, fully supplied factory compared to the original place you could build it in your core territory, let's say you built it in Scotland, you would be getting 70% of the value that you would otherwise be getting. There is no changing this value in this game. It will always be 70% of what you would otherwise be getting. Of course, with the option I mentioned earlier on regarding how loyalty can affect supply and line of sight, you can get even more difficulties with trying to get even that much out of it because you would get less supply, production, and spread in disloyal regions anyway, meaning you'd have to spend more just to get up to that 70% value, for example, if you maxed out the supply of a location. Unfortunately, there is no way to absorb a loyalty or make them loyal to you in the game. However, if you do want to get the full 100% and you maybe don't have enough room where you are, or maybe this loyalty has a resource that you really want from it that you don't have in your core loyalty, there is a way to handle it, and that is in colonies. Now, I've already made a guide on how to manage colonies in this game. You can find that in the description below in the playlist if you would like to see more of the guides that I've made on this game. But the important thing in regards to this guide here is to know that if you have a colony, it's essentially a nation under you that is using its own core loyalty. So rather than showing here that it's a loyalty that does not belong to you, this would not happen because it would be like, okay, this is their core loyalty. So they would get 100% of the production value that they should be getting. And colonies by default will send you any excess production of anything that they make rather than try to profit off of it themselves. So for example, I could go to say Liberia, which has a lot of rubber. I could make it a colony and have them producing the max amount of rubber possible, whereas I just fund them with the money that I would otherwise be spending, you know, on the facilities if I actually own them. And so I could get more bang for my buck by managing colonies instead of just annexing everything that I take over. That is pretty much everything in regards to how loyalty works in this game. There's only one more thing to show, which is a way that you can interact with loyalties to maybe give them away. So if we go over here and look at Scotland, and I go ahead and I click on the flag here, I open up the exiled nation of Scotland. I can go to severe actions here, which is where I would usually declare war. But let's say I had, doesn't matter if it's all of Scotland's loyalty or even just part of it. Let's say I wanted to take all of the loyalty belonging to Scotland that I own and make it its own independent nation. I would click on this little button here and I could return the loyal territory to Scotland. And so I could release it as an independent country, and then all the land I personally have that belongs to their loyalty will go to this new independent Scotland. And if someone else owns loyalty of Scotland, well, they would keep that and be unaffected by my decision. Additionally, this is also where I could choose to make them a colony, return as colony. If I accidentally annex them, or I started out with them already annexed and I wanted to make them a colony after, this is where I would go ahead and just bam, instant make them a colony. Which brings up a good point actually. If I want to make someone a colony to manage my loyalty better, if we declare war on the Netherlands, for example, which I already have, then if I have a certain game toggle on, which I don't, if I go to my options, general, and then enforce conquest options in solo play, and this will be default if you're in multiplayer, and then I go back to severe actions, you'll see there's 3 buttons here now: annex, colonize, or liberate. So I could just press this to colonize them. However, in solo, I would really recommend that you not even have this enabled, because now you see these 3 buttons are gone. And what will happen instead is when I beat them, the game will have a pop-up prompting me on what I want to do. And it's very easy to forget that these little buttons are here. The game doesn't remind you. So if you're in solo play, I really just recommend that you play with that option off. I don't remember if it's on by default. If it is, please do yourself a favor and just turn it off. I really preferred the game originally when they didn't add this feature in. I don't like it because I've seen so many accidental annexations that weren't meant to happen because of this. And then let's say I don't want my colony's loyalty to be like min-max. Let's say I want to just deal with the 70%, but it's already a colony. Well, that's really simple. I just go over to, for example, Labrador over here, and we go to the same place, severe actions, liberate this colony. No, we annex this colony, and then that will make it my core like territory. It won't have my loyalty. Anything that goes here will have the 70% instead of the full 100% production. And then that's how kind of managing all that works between your loyalties. And that's everything that you need to know about how loyalties work in this game. I hope this guide has been helpful to you guys. If you guys have any other ideas of more tutorials or guides I can make on this game, any questions that you have, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If I don't think that they'll make a good video, I'll at least try to answer your question in the comments. Again, if you want to see more guides, we have a playlist in the description below that you can see. And like I said, tomorrow I'll have a 2030 video talking about how loyalty works in that game, which is notably different. It's notably changed, so I'm excited to explain that to you guys. But for now, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.